Anthropic flew its most senior technical staff to Washington this week. They came home with nothing changed. Quick reset, because this one's been moving for days, so to get everybody oriented, a U.S. Commerce Department export control order pulled Anthropic's two strongest models offline for every customer on Earth just this last Friday. Claude Fable 5 was the consumer model, and the more cyber-capable tier underneath it, Mythos 5. The June 13th and 14th episodes walked through the mechanics of who reportedly set it off, and today is yet another beat in that story. The high-level negotiation that was supposed to end it just failed. Here's who went. Tom Brown, Anthropic's Chief Compute Officer, Sarah Heck, Head of External Affairs, Logan Graham, who runs the Frontier Red Team, and the researcher Nicholas Carlini. They sat down with Commerce on Monday. When they left, the worldwide suspension was still in place. The administration's position has not moved. Officials maintain that Fable 5's guardrails can be stripped to unlock the cyber capability of the restricted Mythos tier, pointing to a jailbreak that Amazon researchers surfaced. That is the claim. But now look at who's lined up against it. Dozens of security researchers signed an open letter calling the order unjustified, and their words were that models in the Mythos class are not uniquely good at finding software flaws, and pulling them, they argue, benches the defenders who use exactly this capability every single day. Then there's Kate Musauris. She reviewed the underlying jailbreak paper. Her verdict: the technique should never have triggered an export control. Content guardrails, she said, are speed bumps, not security boundaries for a skilled adversary. So that's one of the many security researchers who read that actual paper saying that the premise itself simply doesn't hold. So now Commerce has signaled that it would bring Fable 5 back for consumer use, but only if Anthropic fully resolves a jailbreak that Anthropic and the security community say was never the real threat. Now, the full thread on this one with sources is in today's Century Report. But here's the limit the whole order keeps running into. It reaches exactly one company's two named models. The capability that it's trying to contain is already running in systems that the directive doesn't touch. In the same window that the talks collapsed, the Chinese lab Z.AI, which you'll remember we recently covered, releasing a very powerful coding model, they also just open-sourced their model GLM 5.2, and they named the Fable disablement as their reason for doing so. Founders in India pushed their own open weight plans forward. Policymakers in Europe moved on sovereign compute. I'll repeat what I said yesterday. A government can switch off a model. The intelligence behind it, though, has already left the building. And every week that this order holds, more of it walks out the door on purpose. All right, let's shift away to a different ledger of the AI build-out, the physical one, where the power plants are. The Justice Department went to court this week to kill a pollution lawsuit. The case was brought by the NAACP, and it was filed under the Clean Air Act. The target is xAI, and the gas turbines powering its data centers near Memphis, Tennessee. On May 16th, the Century Report highlighted a Utility Drive article that said that the DOJ might step in, and this week it did, filing alongside xAI and the state of Mississippi. And here's the argument, in their words: switching off the turbines threatens America's national economic and energy security. Why? Because Grok, xAI's model, supports the Department of War military operations, including, the filing says, the recent strikes against Iran. A Department of Defense declaration in the filing goes even further. It says that Grok's government model is one of only 4 AI systems supporting the mission-critical work across classified networks. So a local permit dispute becomes a question of military necessity. The community downwind sued over the air it breathes, and the government's answer is that the air is now a national security matter that no court should second-guess. Now look at what the filing could not bury: the numbers. The original suit named 27 turbines running without a Clean Air Act permit at xAI's Colossus II site in South Haven, Mississippi. But emails obtained by the Southern Environmental Law Center showed 57 turbines running without permits by mid-May, many of them added in the weeks after the NAACP filed, and the additions drove the pollution up hard. Nitrogen oxide emissions at the site jumped 111% since April, fine particulate matter up 83%, formaldehyde up 88%. In communities already carrying a heavy pollution burden, that's asthma and heart disease, by the center's estimate. The document meant to end the case is the one that put the cost onto the public record. The air a South Haven family breathes, now quantified to the percentage point. That is the first thing that any honest accounting of who pays for the intelligence era has to establish, and a filing built to make the question disappear actually just answered it. Okay, now over to the best news of the day. After two stories about who controls access, this one is about the capability actually reaching a single person all the way. Casey Harrell is paralyzed by ALS, and his team just called him something nobody's been called before: the power user of a speech BCI. It's a brain-computer interface. That reads the part of his brain, and it handles speaking and turns the intent into words. Here's the number that's really important. More than 3,800 hours of use at home over 22.6 months with no researchers in the room. And it worked that well, 99%. Reported this week in Nature Medicine. Stay with how far that has come from where this started. 3 years ago, a speech BCI was a 5-hour operation with a research team hovering over a single sentence. Now here's a man at his own table in his own home for nearly 2 years. Now here's how it works. American English is commonly modeled with around 40 phonemes, the smallest building blocks of sound. The system reads his speech motor cortex and maps the neural signature of each phoneme and assembles them into words. Day one, back in 2023, a 50-word vocabulary at about 99.6% accuracy. Today, 125,000 words at 99% accuracy across open speech. He drives a cursor, too, sends email, surfs the web, keeps doing his work as an environmental activist. And the system learned his life. He asked for a privacy mode that auto-deletes what it decodes, and a profanity filter that he can switch on while reading to his young daughter. His own words on this whole thing: "We are making the road as we walk it, or roll it, so to speak." Now let's hold the honest limit next to the wonder, as amazing as this is. This is just one person. Yes, it's sustained, but it's not a population result. A BCI researcher who wasn't involved does caution that there's no guarantee that the next person with ALS gets that same outcome. Scar tissue can degrade these signals over time, though it hasn't happened in this case. A broad deployment still runs through surgery, regulatory clearance, and showing the recording holds steady across many different brains. But restoring speech to a paralyzed person used to be measured in single sentences in a lab, and usually in the negative. For Casey Harrell, it's measured in thousands of hours at his own table, and a bedtime story his daughter hears in his cadence with the words that he chose. Let's shift away to another story about someone setting their own terms. Erin Mouse is a 34-year-old software engineer in North Carolina. In mid-May, she won something that currently is quite rare: a legal exemption from using AI at her job. She is a Unitarian Universalist. She requested the accommodation in April, citing beliefs her faith holds about the ecological and ethical responsibility. The legal basis is Title VII, the protection for sincerely held religious belief, and that bar is lower than a lot of HR departments actually assume. She's now writing and reviewing her code by hand, having been granted the exemption. So let's be careful with what this is. Her objection is very specific: a mandate imposed without her consent, and the law gave her a way to push back on it. The frame here's the point, though, because AI's value grows with the breadth of who chooses to work alongside it. This is one person negotiating the conditions of that partnership and raising concerns that they see within it. And she's not alone in raising those concerns either. Right around the same time that her accommodation was granted, Pope Leo XIV, first encyclical, the Magnificat Humanitas, gave 1.4 billion Catholics a written articulation of the same concern. It said that workplaces should design systems that are centered on the human person and not solely on performance, and it warned that current approaches can physically de-skill workers, subject them to automated surveillance, and relegate them to rigid and repetitive tasks. So there is an open question here. Nobody knows how long that Mouse's exemption runs, or what happens if her by-hand work falls behind colleagues measured on AI-assisted throughput. There is no settled framework yet that says whether an accommodation right or a productivity metric wins that fight, but the terms on which AI enters a workplace are being written right now. And this is one of the first times here that one of the people who the system actually touches got a legal say in how it works for her. All right, last story for today. This one is about who gets to write the rules for all of this. As the federal government pushes a bill to freeze every state's AI rules, a new poll says that most Americans, including the people who love AI the most, want more rules, not fewer. So let's start with the maneuver. The June 12th edition of the Century Report tracked the White House courting children's advocates and the tech industry toward a federal bill that would preempt state AI laws. New this week. With the midterms coming, the administration is reportedly pairing that preemption with a slate of children's online safety measures. It's attached to the broad industry-favored override of the child safety bill that actually predates ChatGPT, and the pairing has produced so much confusion that the backers of both policies aren't sure who's even steering anymore. And the stakes are large here. Preemption would freeze the only binding AI accountability floor that currently exists. State laws, like I've mentioned before, like Illinois' independent audit mandate and New York City's enforcement office. Now let's look at the poll here. Johns Hopkins surveyed more than 2,000 Americans and released the poll numbers the same week. Over 70% want the right to deal with a human instead of an AI in medical and legal and educational and governmental settings. 75% want to be told when they're talking to a machine. 73% want to ban AI use of a person's face and voice, period. 68% want AI-generated images labeled, and this is what cuts through the noise. The demand held across party lines. It held among daily AI users. 80% of skilled daily users feel good about AI, and they want those rules anyway. A cross-partisan majority even backed a digital dividend, which is a small monthly payment to every adult funded by a tax on the large tech companies. And the floor is already hardening from underneath. 6 states passed AI disclosure laws this year. A New York-led coalition of attorneys general has moved from writing laws to issuing subpoenas. We just covered this recently. They're formally demanding documents from OpenAI over its treatment of minors, its health data handling, and its model design. The near-term signal to watch is whether more state AGs join that subpoena in the coming weeks. A federal freeze drafted now would arrive after all those precedents are already set and against a majority across every party, asking for the exact thing that the freeze would erase. All right, let's bring it to a close today. 2 words carried the whole day: national security. The administration used them to keep 2 AI models offline worldwide. The Justice Department used them to throw out a community's clean air case. Same move both times. Take something that a court or a competitor could question, a permit, a model, and recast it as a necessity that nobody's allowed to question. But here's where that move runs out of road. The export order reaches one company's 2 named models, while comparable capability shipped freely in open weights the same week. The pollution that the DOJ filing is trying to bury is on the public record right now, measured to the percentage point. The override keeps reaching for control over capability, and the day keeps showing it can't quite get there. Because look at what's actually filling in around it. 6 states wrote a floor, and a coalition of attorneys general started enforcing one. More than 70% of Americans, the enthusiasts included, said plainly that they want rules and what they want them to be. None of that came down from the top. It is accelerating from underneath, from the people closest to the system. And the capability itself, when it arrives all the way, doesn't land in some vault that somebody can switch off. It lands on a kitchen table, in Casey Harrell's restored voice, reading his daughter a bedtime story in the words he chose. That is the trajectory that these gates keep trying to own. But despite that, the trajectory is happening anyway. We'll see you tomorrow.